Hello, A push people. We made it to period 3 in chapter 7. Um, so today's, I'm sure, is the first day you are really digging into the chapter 7 material. Um, so I posted the uh, the chapter reading on Google Classroom for you to look at as always, and we are going to dig into the age of Jefferson as a whole chapter, but more specifically today, at least for this video, we are going to dig into the Louisiana Purchase and what that means for the United States and why we need it. So, the Louisiana Territory encompassed a large and largely unexplored tract of western land through which the Mississippi and Missouri rivers flowed. At the mouth of the Mississippi lay the territory's most valuable property in terms of commerce, the port of New Orleans. For many years, Louisiana and New Orleans had been claimed by Spain, but in 1800, the French military and political leader Napoleon Bonaparte secretly forced Spain to give the Louisiana Territory back to its former owner, France. Napoleon hoped to restore the French Empire in the Americas. By 1803, however, Napoleon had lost interest in this plan for two reasons. First, he needed to concentrate French resources on fighting England because the French Revolution was happening during this time. And number two, a rebellion led by this person cannot pronounce his name. I'm not even gonna try. Against French rule on the island of Santo Domingo had resulted in heavy military losses. So yes, Napoleon wanted to expand the French Empire into the Americas, but at that same time he was dealing with a heavy military conflict. So let's explore the U.S. interest in the Mississippi River, because we were generally built on our waterways, because waterways was a key aspect to trading. So let's see. During Jefferson's presidency, the western frontier expanded beyond Ohio and Kentucky into the Indiana Territory. Settlers in this region depended for their economic existence on transporting goods on rivers that flowed westward into the Mississippi and southward as far as New Orleans. So all these goods in New York, Boston, Philadelphia was traveling on those waterways to the Mississippi River down to New Orleans. They were greatly alarmed, therefore, when in 1802 Spanish officials who were still in charge of New Orleans closed the port to Americans. They revoked the right to deposit granted in the Pinckney Treaty of 1795, which had allowed American farmers tax-free use of the port. So all this trade that we did along the Mississippi River and through the port of New Orleans got cut off in 1802. People on the frontier clamored for government action, in addition to being concerned about the economic impact of the closing of New Orleans. President Jefferson was troubled by its consequences on foreign policy. He feared that so long as a foreign power controlled the river at New Orleans, the United States risked entanglement in European affairs. So this puts Jefferson in a pickle, because our foreign policy largely derived from Washington's farewell address when he talked about no allies and we need to stay isolated. So that's largely been the foreign policy, but this caused Jefferson to rethink it or get other ideas. So Jefferson sent ministers to France with instructions to offer up to $10 million for both New Orleans and the strip of land extending from the coast eastward to Florida. So he sent ministers to negotiate with France, and back then we only wanted the city of New Orleans and basically the Gulf Coast in present-day America. That's all we wanted. If the American ministers failed in their negotiations with the French, they were instructed to begin discussions with Britain for a U.S.-British alliance. Napoleon's ministers seeking funds for a war against the Britain offered to sell not only New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana Purchase, Louisiana Territory, for $15 million. The surprised American ministers quickly went beyond their instructions and accepted. So we only want to New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. Napoleon offered us the whole Louisiana Territory, doubling the size of the United States. Jefferson and most Americans strongly approved of the Louisiana Purchase. Nevertheless, a constitutional problem troubled the president. Jefferson was committed to a strict interpretation of the Constitution, which we talked about in the last chapter, and rejected Hamilton's argument that certain powers were implied. No clause in the Constitution explicitly stated that a president could purchase foreign land. In this case, Jefferson determined to set aside his idealisms for the country's good. He submitted the purchase agreement to the Senate, arguing that lands could be added to the United States as an application of the president's power to make treaties. Casting aside the criticisms of Federalist senators, the Republican majority in the Senate quickly ratified the purchase. So there was no set agreement in the Constitution for a land purchase. So Jefferson had a major conflict between his strict interpretation of the Constitution, his theory, and Madison's theory that powers can be implied. There's such things as implied powers. We have largely went in the directions of implied powers so far in the U.S. So the Louisiana Purchase more than doubled the size of the United States, removed a European presence from the nation's borders, and extended the western frontiers to land beyond the Mississippi. Furthermore, the acquisition of millions of acres of land strengthened Jefferson's hope that his country's future would be based on a farming society of independent farmers rather than Hamilton's vision of an urban and industrial society. In political terms, the Louisiana Purchase increased Jefferson's popularity and showed the Federalist to a weak, sectionalist, New England-based party that could do little more than complain about Democratic Republicans' policies. So this turned out to be a big win for Jefferson. So now it gets to the point of the Louisiana Purchase was largely undiscovered, so what are we gonna do about that? The answer lies in Lewis and Clark. So even before Louisiana was purchased, Jefferson had persuaded Congress to fund a scientific exploration of the trans-Mississippi West to be led by Captain Meriwether Lewis and Lieutenant William Clark. The Louisiana Purchase greatly increased the importance of the expedition. Lewis and Clark set out from St. Louis in 1804, crossed the Rockies, reached the Oregon coast on the Pacific Ocean, then turned back and completed the return journey in 1806. The benefits of this expedition were many: greater geographic and scientific knowledge of the region, stronger U.S. claims to the Oregon Territory, better relations with American Indians, and more accurate maps and land routes for fur trappers and future settlers. So the Lewis and Clark expedition went strongly good. was good, and it improved U.S. relations with Indians and future created maps for future settlers. So that's it for the Louisiana Purchase. And yeah, so see you guys in the next video.